Creating a personal financial budget and tracking the daily expenses with Notion database would certainly help to explore and learn different features and capabilities of Notion database. We are going to learn how to link two databases using relation property, how to aggregate numbers using Rollup, Notion database formulas, templates, create database views, and many more, including a bit of personal finance. But a big disclaimer, this is not a personal finance video. Creating the habit tracker using Notion database was just a stepping stone. In case you have not seen that video, you can watch it to learn the basics of Notion database. I'll put the link in the description. But creating the personal financial budget and expense tracker database is going to be a big leap towards learning the advanced features of Notion database. There are many things to cover, and doing so in a single video is going to be very lengthy. So this is going to be a video series, and this is the part on of that video series. So let's first do some planning and prep work. We shall create 3 databases, one for yearly budget data, and let's call it yearly budget database. One for monthly budget details, let's call it monthly budget database. And the last one for capturing different kind of regular and daily expenses, and let's call it expense tracker database. And this is how all these databases are going to be linked with each other. We shall define the expense heads and the corresponding budgeted amount of that year in the yearly budget database. Then we shall use and add the same expense heads in the monthly database to keep track of the monthly expenses. And there will be a link between the monthly expense head and the yearly expense head, by which we will be able to keep track of monthly expense heads in the yearly budget database. Next, we have to see if there is any expense head that needs to be broken down further, and if we have to break any expense into the sub level, then we can do that and keep track of all those different sub level items in the expense tracker database. For example, we have broken down the expense head 1 into 2 sub level 1 and sub level 2 in the expense tracker database. Similar to yearly and monthly budget database link, there will be link between expense tracker database and monthly budget database. Since these two are part of expense head 1, so there will be link of this 2 with expense head 1, and expense head 2 will have a link with expense head 2, and expense head 3 will have a link with expense head 3. Since all items of expense tracker database are linked to monthly budget database, so we shall use Notion database Rollup feature to aggregate all expenses under any specific expense head of monthly budget database and store that value in the monthly budget database. Let's say VV is the total actual, XX is the budgeted amount, and VV is the actual. Similarly, all the monthly values of any specific expense head would be aggregated and stored in yearly budget database. Again, XX is the budgeted value and VV is the actual. And by this, we shall be able to track the actual expense both at monthly budget database level as well as yearly budget database level. It might sound little complex and confusing, but trust me, when we start creating all of this step by step, you will find it very easy and you will be able to understand it properly. Now, before we jump into Notion and start creating the databases with some random expense type and different numbers, I thought of spending little more time to make it more useful by covering a bit about personal financial budgeting, so that apart from learning the Notion database, if any one of you really want to create the personal financial budget and expense tracker system like I did for mine, you may find this useful. But again, a big disclaimer, this is not a personal financial video. You need to spend some time to identify what are the main expense types that you have got. Here are some that I have got in my budget database: grocery, fresh items, utility bills, medical, insurance, daughter's education, vacation, shopping, outside food, car ownership. You identify yours and write those down. Once that is identified, then see which of the expense head needs to be broken down further and identify the corresponding sub items. For example, in my case, I have utility bills which is further broken down to electricity, gas, broadband, mobile. I have insurance premium which is further broken down to term insurance, health insurance. Similarly, the car ownership is further broken down to car loan, fuel and insurance. Next, identify the expense frequency, whether it is monthly, quarterly, yearly or ad hoc. For example, electricity, which is a monthly bill. Car insurance is a yearly one. Daughter's education fees is a quarterly one. Vacation is ad hoc. So these are just few examples. You need to go through your expense items and then identify the frequency of all those expense items. And finally, the most difficult thing, you need to allocate the amount for all the expense items. So let's say electricity bill is the monthly expense. So we need to allocate an amount here. Similarly, car insurance is a yearly payment. So we need to allocate the amount here. And same is for quarterly one and ad hoc ones. Once the money is allocated to all these expense items, then we can determine the yearly values based on the amount and frequency. Still with me, this is the last thing before we go into the Notion and start creating the databases. I created my personal financial budget and expense tracker to keep track of three things. Number one, where all I am spending my money. Number two, if I am spending more than I am earning. And number three, what is my survival amount. Survival amount is nothing but the bare minimum amount that I need to survive. And guess what? We can capture that as well in our budget database. And for that, you need to do one more additional step. You need to categorize your expense head and indicate whether it is a survival, for example, utility bills, groceries, fresh items, daughter's school fees, or it is something that you can reduce like outside food, vacation, or a mix of survival and reducible item like shopping. I know it might be overwhelming if you have never done the budgeting before, but one day you have to give it a try if you are really serious about creating one for you. However, if you are here just to learn the Notion database, then you can consider all those financial related things as example data point and focus on just learning the technical side of creating Notion database. That's all about the preparation and planning that we need to create the personal financial budget and expense tracking system using Notion database. Let's end the first video here. In the next video, we'll start building it and I'll see you there. Thank you for watching.